Everyone. Thank you for coming to Pennsylvanians for Modern Court's Commonwealth Court Candidate Forum. I am Deborah Gross, CEO of Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts. I want to thank Dauphin County Library for hosting this event and thank the League of Women Voters, the Pennsylvania Bar Association, the Philadelphia Bar Association, the Allegheny County Bar Association, and the Committee of 70 for co-sponsoring this program with us. PMC is a nonprofit dedicated to assuring a Pennsylvania judicial system which provides impartiality, fairness, accessibility, and respect. We have advocated for judicial reforms that promote the rule of law, access to justice, and a diverse, qualified, and independent judiciary. Our Spring Into Action fundraiser honoring the current and past 5 governors is next week, April 27th. Please support PMC and its programming by joining our event. The primary elections are May 18th, for which you must register to vote by May 3rd, and please do vote. Judges make important decisions that impact your lives. You should investigate who is running and research their qualifications. You can find out more about the candidates running on PMC's website, www.pmconline.org. We held previously candidate forums for the Supreme Court and Superior Court judicial positions. Those forums are recorded and available on our website. The Commonwealth Court is unique to Pennsylvania. Its focus is on issues of state and local government and regulatory agencies. While it is an appeals court, it can also sit like a trial court in certain situations. There are 9 judges on this court, and cases are typically heard by a panel of 3 judges. A few rules before we begin. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and we hope to have some time at the end to answer them. Please know that we have received a number of questions from you when you registered. Additionally, please be aware that under the Pennsylvania Code of Judicial Conduct, judicial candidates cannot make pledges, promises, or commitments on specific issues or on cases that could appear in front of them. That's to protect the impartiality of judges and to provide us confidence that the judges will make decisions based on the facts and law before them. Now I would like to welcome Karl Myers of Stradley, Ronon, who has personally argued and briefed numerous precedent-setting cases before the many appellate courts of Pennsylvania and in other jurisdictions. He maintains a particular focus in cases before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, Commonwealth and Superior Courts, as well as the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Karl has helped us moderate other prior year's candidate forums, and I welcome you back and thank you for your assistance.
Thank you very much, Debbie. I appreciate that nice introduction. You read it exactly as I wrote it. I appreciate that very much. For those that do not know me, I am Karl Myers. I am chair of the Appellate Practice Group at Stradley, Ronon in Philadelphia, and I'm also chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Appellate Advocacy Committee. And it's my honor to be your moderator tonight. I want to just briefly acknowledge Pennsylvanians for Modern Courts and its other co-sponsors of this event. We greatly appreciate this public service. And we also appreciate the leadership of Debbie Gross, President and CEO of PMC. As Debbie indicated, we have 2 seats up for election on the Commonwealth Court this year. The primary is May 18th. We encourage everyone to get out and vote. And we're thrilled to have all 6 of the candidates here with us today. We greatly appreciate the candidates' time. And we are hopeful that you, the voters, will get to learn a little bit about these candidates so that you can make an informed selection when you cast your vote. So in terms of the format, this is a 90-minute program. We're going to start off with 2-minute introductions where each of the 6 candidates is going to get to tell you a little bit about him or herself. And then after that, we're going to get to as many questions as we can. We're going to do a format where we change who answers each question first. The questions are known only to me. They are questions of general application. And each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to respond. So we have an even playing field and a completely fair format here. And also, as Debbie said, if you have your questions, please do submit them. We do have limited time and we have 6 candidates and we want to make sure that we hear from them adequately. but we'll do what we can to try to get your questions in as well. So please do submit your questions. So let's get into it. So let's start up with the introductions. And I randomly selected what you might call a batting order. And so the first candidate up to tell us a bit about herself is Judge Lori Dumas. So Judge Dumas, if you would take yourself off mute, you have 2 minutes to tell us about yourself. Judge Dumas, can you hear me?
I can. I'm sorry. I'm having problems, but I just had to switch to my phone. So good evening, everyone. My name is Judge Lori Dumas, and I am running for the Commonwealth Court. I am a Court of Common Pleas judge in Philadelphia. I've been sitting for 19 years, and I've had the privilege of serving in many different areas. I've served in the family court, in the criminal court, and now I'm serving in the civil court. I am privileged to be here with you tonight. I'm looking forward to sharing my my knowledge and my philosophies with you in this forum. I thank you, all of the groups that have assembled us here tonight to provide information and education to our viewers and to our voters. And I just wanted to once again say thank you and welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Judge Dumas. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Judge J. Andrew Crompton. Judge Crompton, why don't you go ahead and take yourself off mute and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank the same groups for having this forum. Nothing says modern like modern courts than a Zoom debate. So it's my pleasure to be here. I am Drew Crompton. I am currently a Commonwealth Court judge. I've been sitting as a Commonwealth Court judge since early 2000. I have drafted about 100 opinions in my capacity as a Commonwealth Court judge. Prior to becoming a judge, I worked in the Senate for a couple decades as general counsel. I worked on legislation and regulations and litigation, and often tried cases and had cases heard before the Commonwealth Court and the Supreme Court. I am a regular dad. I've been married for 17 years. I have 2 young daughters, 9 and 14. I serve in a bunch of different professional capacities, which we can get into at the point down the road. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone, and it's my honor to be here.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. Next up, Judge Sierra Thomas Street. Why don't you unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to all of our hosts for having us tonight for this wonderful forum, this educational forum. I am Sierra Street. I'm a judge on the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia. I'm going into my 8th year on the bench. And before I became a judge, I was a trial attorney as a public defender for several years. And I also worked at a nonprofit in affordable housing on the civil side of the law for several years. That's where I launched my candidacy back in 2013 for the Court of Common Pleas. I'm also a mother and a grandmother. I was raised by a single mother who's a nurse and Army vet. And my mother pushed me to get my education. I attended Howard University, like Kamala Harris. And once I graduated from law school, I went right into public interest law, as I stated. I also represented a local union as prepaid legal services for a little while. And I've done a lot of work in the community. I'm very community service oriented. I've always been that way. I volunteered at Project Home. And while I was, after being elected, I was selected to be the lead supervising judge of the Philadelphia Indicted Grand Jury Program. And I was elected by my peers to be the chair of Judicial Council, where we mentored high school students, law school students, and students in the juvenile justice system. And I just say all of that to say that I have a very diverse background. And that's why I'm here seeking, well, I'm not here seeking anything. We're here to talk about the Commonwealth Court, and I can't wait to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Street. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Judge David Spurgeon. Judge Spurgeon, take yourself off mute and let us know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. I am Judge David Spurgeon. I am from Allegheny County. I have sat on the bench for the last 5 years in Allegheny County in the family division. And during that time, I am proud to say that I've never been overruled for a decision that I've made. Prior to that, I spent 19 years in the district attorney's office, where I was the youngest deputy district attorney in Allegheny County history. During that time, I became a passionate advocate for our problem-solving courts. I helped create and supervise some of our courts, such as mental health court, veterans court, and a specialized docket for perpetrators of violence against women. And I will tell you that I come from humble beginnings. I come from an old steel town called McKeesport, Pennsylvania, and I grew up at that steel mill collapsed. And as a result of that, I suffered some financial instability and did a lot of things to make sure that I could get where I needed to go, which included sometimes working multiple jobs while in college and law school to make sure that I would have enough money to not only eat, but buy books and go to school. So I bring a perspective to the Commonwealth Court that I think that is going to be beneficial to all Pennsylvanians.
Thank you, Judge. Next up is Stacy Wallace. Ms. Wallace, tell us about yourself.
First, I'd like to thank you, Karl, and also thank Ashley and Deborah. And Daniel's not on, but he was a great worker and very kind leading up to this process. I'd also like to thank our hosts and sponsors, the Pennsylvania Modern Courts and Dauphin County Library. Thank you specifically to the sponsors, the Committee of 70, League of Women Voters, Allegheny County, Dauphin County, Philadelphia, and Pennsylvania Bar Associations. Before going into my qualifications, I want to tell you a little bit about myself personally. My husband and I met in the library at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford, where I waited 5 years to be engaged. When he proposed to me, he was ready to get married within the next couple of months. So we only had a 3-month engagement and he got his way. So now we have an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. My husband and I both own small businesses in McKean County and Bradford, Pennsylvania. He owns a civil engineering firm and I own a small law firm and I'm a solo practitioner. I graduated from Duquesne University in 2004, and I've had the opportunity to work for 3 different judges at 2 different court levels, the Court of Common Pleas and the Superior Court. During my career, I've been employed by the government, by nonprofits, by a corporation, by a small law firm, and then I opened my own law firm in 2012. As my firm has transitioned over the years, most recently, I have written appellate briefs for other law firms. So other lawyers have put their faith in me to write their appellate briefs. As a general practitioner in a rural area, I've practiced in a wide variety, but most relevant to the Commonwealth Court includes election law, municipal law, and banking law matters. Specifically, when I worked at a bank, I wrote bank policy that had to comply with both federal and state regulations. I also had the opportunity to manage $90 million of trust assets and administer trust documents. Currently, I'm the president.
Ms. Wallace, I mean to cut you off, but you're at your 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thanks. And I don't mean to cut anybody off. And
that's okay. And we couldn't, there's no seeing of the folder, just so you know, I couldn't see it.
Oh, understood. And I'll signal you, not a problem at all. Thank you, Ms. Wallace, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Amanda Green Hawkins, go ahead and take yourself off mute and let us know a little bit about you.
Sure, and thank you all for having us here tonight. This is a wonderful opportunity to inform people about what the courts do, particularly the Commonwealth Court. I am Amanda Green Hawkins, and I am running for Pennsylvania's Commonwealth Court. I live in the city of Pittsburgh, right in the city, with my husband and our 2 children. They're both Pittsburgh public school students, and I have been an attorney with the Steelworkers Union here in Pittsburgh for going on 20 years. And it makes me uniquely prepared as well as uniquely qualified for the Commonwealth Court because it's the court that handles appeals from administrative agencies. And for close to 20 years, I have been working for the largest industrial union in North America. We represent about 1 million workers and retirees throughout the public and private sectors of our economy. I'm also one of only 2,000 or so attorneys in the entire country, recognized by the National AFL-CIO as a union lawyer. And being a union lawyer means that your career, your work is steeped in administrative law. And we know that administrative law is a lot of what the court does, hearing those appeals. And I also do work with various community organizations advocating for justice and equality for marginalized members of our society. And I look forward to speaking with you all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green Hawkins, appreciate it. We have some very impressive candidates. I think everybody watching will agree. So let's move into the questions. Now for our first question, we're going to rotate who goes first. And for For this first question, we'll start with Judge Crompton. And the question is the why question. Why do you want to be elected a judge of the Commonwealth Court?
For several reasons. First of all, I should say that someone told me that Commonwealth Court is the most important court in Pennsylvania that most people have never heard of. And I think there's probably some truth to that. People don't understand, and I'm not blaming anyone, but they just don't fully comprehend the wide, diverse subjects that come before this court. And they also don't understand always that this is immediately below the Supreme Court, and the only, in most cases, end with the Commonwealth Court or our sister court, the Superior Court. So often we speak last as a court on very important issues, mostly appellate issues. Personally, I sought the nomination and the confirmation 2 years ago because I thought it married my skill set of working on 20 years of legislative and statutory drafting. I became, I think, without puffing myself up, a bit of an expert when it came to drafting. Much of what we do in the Commonwealth Court is we interpret the law, and no more, no less. And someone has a dispute, sometimes the other branches of government, sometimes local governments, and they need us to put the final period, if you will, on a certain very specific piece of law. And I think I'm well suited for that. I have enjoyed immensely my time on the Commonwealth Court. It allows everyone, all the judges who are quite collegial with each other, to exercise their brains, if you will. These are hard issues. They're diverse, as I said, but they're challenging and they're rewarding. There's lots of reasons I've thoroughly enjoyed my time on the court, but I've been appreciative of the honor to do so for the last 15 months.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. Next up is Judge Street. Tell us why you would like to be a Commonwealth Court judge as opposed to keeping your current job.
Thank you. Yes, I'll take it back a little bit. So I was a political science major in college, and I was able to intern at the United States Department of State while I was in college. And then I went to law school and I interned at the White House. So I've always been involved or interested in government and policy. Once I graduated from law school, I went right into public interest law, as I described earlier. And I became a lawyer because I wanted to help my community. Then I became a judge because I realized that I love being in court. I was a trial attorney, and I also still wanted to help the community. And I've been able to do that as a judge. It's just been a larger platform. And when you look at the Commonwealth Court, I agree. The issues are so diverse. They affect all Pennsylvanians. I call them quality of life issues, bread and butter issues that they handle. And to me, it's just another platform where I would be able to affect the community on a larger scale and take my talents to the next level. And I believe that my experience is diverse enough to do that. When I tell you I was a trial attorney on the criminal side of the law, and then on the civil side of the law, and now I'm a trial judge on the civil side of the law. I'm assigned to the civil division, and I formerly was assigned to the criminal division. So we're talking about a special appellate court. This appellate court has original jurisdiction. So it's a trial court sometimes as well. So when you talk about experience as a trial attorney and a trial judge, someone who's interested in community-based issues, government-based issues, then that's what the Commonwealth Court is. And because they affect all Pennsylvanians, I think it's such a special court. And we know we're the only state in the entire country that even has a Commonwealth Court. So that's how unique it is. And that's why I'm running for the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you, Judge Street. Next up is Judge Spurgeon. Judge Spurgeon, tell us why you would like to be elected to the Commonwealth Court.
Well, I would be very excited to be elected to the Commonwealth Court for many of the same reasons that have already been articulated. And this court is so unique. It has such a wide array of topics that it covers, and it does cover issues that pertain to all of our citizens of Pennsylvania. And it may range on one day from a topic that is completely different on the next. And I think that's what we want. We want to keep people engaged, and we want to keep our judges engaged. And I'm fascinated by that prospect of constantly dealing with different issues on a wide range of topics. I believe that the Commonwealth Court is something that is so important because the Commonwealth Court makes sure that the government is following the law. And I think that that's something that's very, very important to fall back upon. You know, I was also a political science major, and I had worked as a legislative aide in the Pennsylvania State Senate. And so I understand the importance of good government and making sure that we are actually having our government follow the law. That's part of the contract that we have as citizens with our government. And I think that the things that that court tackles are things that don't get the attention that they deserve. But those are the basic things from dealing with day-to-day functions of people's lives that need to be addressed by people that are competent and people that are able to do so, and people that are willing to take that decision-making process very, very seriously. And that's why I believe that I would be a great judge on the Commonwealth Court. The Pennsylvania Bar Association has also decided that I would be a great judge on that court. And that organization rated me as highly recommended, the only candidate in this race for that role. So I believe that that background, as well as the rating by the Bar Association, makes a perfect suit for me to be on that court.
Thank you, Judge Spurgeon. Next up, Ms. Wallace, why do you want to be elected to the Commonwealth Court?
I have felt a calling to be a judge for quite some time, and I think that it's primarily because my primary purpose in life is to better other people's lives. And the skill set that I naturally have is one that's analytical, and it's problem solving, and it yearns to seek justice to all people. Now, specifically the Commonwealth Court, I already mentioned some of my substantive overlap with the Commonwealth Court, but frankly, I can think of nothing more rewarding than keeping the government honest.
Terrific. Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Next up, Ms. Green Hawkins, tell us why you would like to be elected a judge of the Commonwealth Court.
Sure. Well, with my administrative law background, I certainly have the experience to be on Commonwealth Court. I've also done voter protection work, which is all election law, but we know something that the Commonwealth Court handles as well. And excuse me, and I've also served as an elected official, which also gives me insight into additional work of the Commonwealth Court, being suits by or against the government or within its jurisdiction. But most importantly, aside from the experience, I want to serve on Commonwealth Court, to be of service. The job is about serving the people of Pennsylvania. And I can tell you that as an attorney with nearly 20 years experience all around this country, I've appeared before judges, 3-judge appellate panels, arbitrators, and mediators. And I can count on one hand the amount of times I've been before third-party neutrals who were women or people of color who have had union experience, union side labor law experience. And it's important to have diversity of race, age, gender, and all of those characteristics. It's also important to have diversity of background. And I certainly can bring all of those important diversities for inclusion into the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you, Ms. Green Hawkins. And lastly, Judge Dumas, why do you want to be elected a judge of the Commonwealth Court?
So I have been working as a trial court judge for a very long time. And so I believe that my privilege of being able to serve the people day in and day out from a court or different areas of the court, which really touch the lives of people who need judges to help them to resolve some of the most intimate and vulnerable issues that they face. When I had the opportunity to start the first human trafficking court in the United States for juvenile victims of trafficking, it gave me an opportunity to really work with some of the stakeholders that actually come before the Commonwealth Court. You know, as a parent of a child who learns differently, working with the school district to make sure that my child got what she needed in an education that she deserved. Working with my mom or with the healthcare systems, ensuring that when my mom was dying from cancer, that she got the services so that she could die with dignity. And so my experience is unique as a trial court judge for almost 20 years in working through legal issues, but working also as a parent and as a daughter who, you know, faces the same issues that the people face that come in front of me. The experience as a trial court judge judge definitely prepares me, but it is the people that I serve and the passion that I have been able to impact with that passion, the people, because we're talking about the administrative nature of this court, but at the core of those administrative issues are people and the issues that people face. And so I would like to take all of that experience, all of the impact, and continue to make that from a level that is impactful to all of us in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Judge Dumas. Appreciate it. All right. So for our next question, we're going to take a little bit of a left turn. We're going to tackle a new topic. And for this question, we're going to start with Judge Street. And the question is judicial elections. Specifically, should we be electing judges in partisan elections in Pennsylvania, in elections funded by campaign contributions? Should we be selecting judges through merit selection, or should we be using some other system? And I have to say that this is basically, because it's a PMC event, this is a mandatory question, has to be featured in every PMC event. So Judge Street, you get first crack at the question, should we be electing judges in Pennsylvania?
I think there are disadvantages and advantages to both processes. So I'm more familiar with the electoral process. Obviously, this is my second election. And I have to say that, you know, as a sitting judge, I can see the argument for merit selection a little more, because it is disheartening sometimes to see sitting judges going through, you know, sort of the political warfare that you have to go through when being elected. And it sort of flies in the face of everything you took the oath, you know, to do when you become a judge. So I'll say that. But I do appreciate elections because it gives the people the chance to choose their judges, and people are the ones who are affected by judges. So, you know, I think there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides. I you know, promote and I support democracy, and I appreciate electoral, you know, elections because of that. I think that people should take advantage of the fact that they have the opportunity to choose their judges. Unfortunately, we know that in these judicial elections, this is the one that most people sit out, especially the ones who end up in court are actually the ones who are not voting. And so, you know, it's sort of ironic, really. But I would say that the merit selection, from what I do know about it, there are also politics involved in that. And so, you know, the quote unquote politics of both situations, you really can't run from. You really can't get away from politics in either process. So I just, you know, don't make me choose one. I'm going to choose elections because that's how I became a judge. And as I said, I do appreciate the fact that you know, with elections, people are supposed to make the choice. Now, whether that happens in judicial elections, I don't know, but that's the way it's supposed to work.
Thank you, Judge Street. Next up, Judge Spurgeon, the impossible question of, your turn for the impossible question of how should we be picking our judges?
Well, I think that I have a pretty unique perspective in terms of I have been appointed as well as won an election. So I was appointed to the Court of Common Pleas and unanimously confirmed by the Senate. And then I subsequently had to run for my position as a Court of Common Pleas judge. And as I'm sure everyone's going to say, we don't know what the proper or the best solution is. Everything has advantages and it has disadvantages, you know, and from that aspect of it, I think that we have to figure out what we're going to learn from each one of those aspects to determine what is the best issue. But that's not for us to decide. We're not going to decide whether or not judges are going to be merit selection appointed or they're going to be elected. That's going to be for another branch of our government to make that decision. But what it does do is, as an elected judge, it makes you get out there and it makes you meet people. You know, one of the benefits of running for judge, and, you know, I thought it was a benefit when I ran for trial judge in Common Pleas, is I got to meet everybody within my entire county, every neighborhood, every section of town. Now, that may be a little bit more daunting as a statewide candidate, but as we know, we serve all Pennsylvanians. So the people that are in Tioga County or Erie County or Philadelphia County or anywhere in between Greene County, everyone has different issues. Everyone has different perspectives. And I think it's important that we have people on the bench that are actually hearing those voices and they're actually realizing that the people that they're making decisions regarding are real people. They're not one-dimensional pieces of paper with names on them. They're actually three-dimensional people. So because of that, I think the electoral system does serve as a benefit for judges to get to know people, to get to know the community that they ultimately serve. Because remember, we are true public servants. And then the ultimate argument, I guess, that you could say is we do stand for retention. So because we do stand for retention, if there is an issue or there's something that comes into play, the Commonwealth citizens do have the ability to recall us.
Terrific. Thank you, Judge Spurgeon. Ms. Wallace, you're next up. Your thoughts about judicial selection methods.
Well, I would start by pointing out to the audience that if we were to change the way that judges were elected, it would need to go through a constitutional amendment. So it would need to go through 2 consecutive sessions of our legislature, and then it would be on a ballot for we the people to decide. Thankfully, this is one of the we the people that doesn't need to make that decision today. I will point out some pros and cons, but I won't reach a conclusion on this matter. I do want to say that we want to avoid a scenario where one has to be independently wealthy to be able to run. I am thankful that I am part of this opportunity right now from a rural area in northwestern Pennsylvania. My county's around 42,000 people, and I'm a solo practitioner, so I am incredibly thankful. Now, are any of the judicial candidates going to sit here and say to you that we're opposed to merit selection? That might make it sound like we think we're without merit. So I think merit selection is brilliant in its marketing, because who can argue with the concept such as merit selection? However, we need to keep in mind that that too will have its own level of political influences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. And Ms. Green Hawkins, your thoughts on judicial selection methods.
Thank you. For every stated reason already, I would just say, I would echo that. I would also say that as an attorney, I understand the importance and respect the importance of notice. It's important that people have notice of what to do and when to do it. And it can make or break someone's case if there's improper notice. And for me, I would say notice is one of the most important things with merit selection. I have no idea of what to do or when to do it. And it's this ephemeral kind of process where you don't know necessarily who to contact or how to contact them. How do you get on the list to even be appointed? Who holds the list? Who can have influence enough with the people who can make the recommendations? And generally, we know it's the senators who can make the recommendations, the senators and the Congress people. In the federal sense, in the state sense, it's the legislators. However, we know that there are other things that are done in order to have your names put before those people. And because there's so many unknowns about that, it's much easier to participate in a process where you have notice of what to do and when to do it. You live in the state for the required time. You be a member of the bar for the required time. You get the required signatures with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and get your name on the ballot, and the people decide. Simple enough.
Thank you. Next up, Judge Dumas, your thoughts on electing versus appointing judges.
So I agree with what everyone else has said. Everyone, I think, has articulated something that is very valuable. But what it actually shows is that people's voices do matter. And whereas I don't want to fall on either side of the issue, but what I will say is that I am a believer that when people's voices are heard, we all benefit. And this is even, as it relates to this particular court, it's about ensuring that, the voices of the people are heard and that the voices of the people are not overpowered by the government. And so, I, like David, I was appointed as well, and I had to run. And I will say that although I was appointed and I was a judge, when I got the votes of the people, it meant something. It meant that, they trusted me and that, they believed that I, would do the job, that I said that I would do. And so, I can't dismiss the value of allowing people to utilize their voice to create, the leadership, and even the change that they want to see, especially through elections.
Thank you, Judge Dumas. And last up is Judge Crompton. Judge, why don't you tell us your views on judicial selection methods?
Well, about 15 years ago, I authored a law review article for Dickinson Law Review stating forth the reasons why I believe that merit selection was better than election. So I guess whether I like it or not, I am on the record for a preference of at least 15 years ago. I think it's currently still my view, but I think Judge Street and others said it well when we are talking about an issue both with flaws. Both sides have issues that are concerning to the electorate. On the merit selection, who's around the table, who makes the decision for who gets appointed. In an election, I think the idea that we get a year hall pass to go out and raise money as a sitting judge also brings recusal and some other issues into play with that. So both sides have their positives, in my opinion. I too was nominated by this governor and confirmed by a bipartisan group of senators about a year and a half ago, which I felt good about. It spoke to, I believe it spoke to my skill set, but I also understand what others say, which is there's a fulfillment when you get selected by the electorate. And obviously, even though perhaps I weigh the merit selection a little heavier than the election, I'm putting myself out there for the people of Pennsylvania to decide whether they want to elect me. So I don't want anyone to think that the scale is too heavily tipped. I joined this race because I honor the idea of an election, even for judges, just as other elected officials.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. All excellent answers. And you know, if you ask me on any given day, I'll give you one opinion. I'll give you the opposite opinion the next day. It's a tough, very tough issue. So for the next question, we're going to start with Judge Spurgeon for this question. I want to talk about judicial philosophy, but I don't want to just ask you what's your judicial philosophy, because I feel like that's a question that is also a tough one to answer. But so maybe let me try it this way. I'd like to know about a life struggle or some forming experience you had in your life that you think says a lot about how you view the role of a judge and our judiciary. So why don't you tell us about a life experience or a life struggle that sort of forms your judicial view or your judicial philosophy? Judge Spurgeon, take us away.
That's a much deeper question. So I think, I think we have judges and we have perspectives as judges, and we're shaped by something. And I think that's the things that we do when we elect judges, is we look for people that have things that shape them, that help them have a different perspective or multiple perspectives. I would probably say the biggest life issue that affected me, that changed my life, was growing up outside of Pittsburgh in the steel industry. I grew up in a town that was steel mill after steel mill after steel mill, and I was in a very financially secure home, and I had a father who was a member of a union. And when I was in late elementary school, early middle school, that steel industry collapsed. And I think the world for many of us collapsed at the time. We were in a large community that was basically built by the steel industry, and we didn't have a lot of diversification. And because of that, a lot of people struggled. And when you've gone from someone who has been financially secure to financially insecure, I think that that's a very humbling experience. And I think that that's something that you just can't ever shake. I believe that that's something that has shaped my public service career. My entire career has been nearly in public service. And I think that's because I've been trying to give back to a community that has been hurt and has been struggling. And I believe that that's how I serve. And that's part of my judicial philosophy on the bench. I believe that people that come in front of us probably haven't been in front of us on their best day. And because they're not in front of us on their best day, we've all had not a great day as well, or a great experience. And that I'm able to relate with people and understand the place they're in. It's all part of a journey for people. And when they come into the court system, they're part of that journey. And because they're part of that journey, it's important that we have judges that have been shaped by, issues as well. So that's probably the biggest thing, is just my life experience growing up. It has really humbled me and has really shaped my outlook on not just the law, but life.
Terrific. Next up, Ms. Wallace, tell us about a shaping or a life experience that shapes your view of the law or informs your judicial philosophy.
Okay, thank you. We all have had challenges and trials in our lives that have given us the opportunity to build character. One of my phrases lately is that it's in the crushing of the grapes that new wine is made. The example that I want to share with you is from my profession, but it also was very personal to me. And it was a scenario where I was court appointed to represent children. And in that particular case, there was a court order in place calling for there to be only supervised visits between the children and the father. And I received a call on my cell phone on a Friday night, wherein the person on the phone told me, we've arranged the supervised visit for tomorrow. The children are going to ride with the father to the supervised location. It's a 45-minute ride. The children will be in the car for 45 minutes with him. Then they'll have their supervised visit. And I said, do not put the children in that car. And one of the responses I got was, we're going to file a petition telling the court that you're in contempt of court. And my response was, I don't think that the court would have ever intended for children to be unsupervised to only go to a supervised visit. But in the event that the court were to find me in contempt, I can live with that. But I can't live with risking putting the children in the car and putting them at risk. So my takeaway from that is, I will always be a bold advocate for the rule of law, and I will do what's right in the face of adversity, even if I'm standing alone.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Ms. Green Hawkins, a life experience or an obstacle you've overcome that shapes your view and shapes your judicial philosophy.
And I would echo similar statements to what Judge Spurgeon spoke about. I grew up in a union household. My dad was a truck driver. He was in a union. My mom worked in a leather factory. She was also in a union. But my dad was also an alcoholic. And there was a time when his employer wanted to fire him because he was an alcoholic. But his union stepped in and stood up for him. And it reminded the employer that he had a family to support and that his job was not just about him, but it was about our whole family's survival and quality of life. And they were able to help my dad get into rehab. And my dad was able to complete rehab and return to work without incident for another 20 years and retire with his dignity, retire with his pension. And had the union not stepped in and done that for my family, for me, my life, I know, would be so very different, because there was a time when my mom also lost her union job because her factory moved to Mexico. And a culmination of those events, our family would have been just devastated. And what I learned from that, maybe not at the time, but the lesson stayed with me all these years, as you can see, is that dignity and respect, making sure people are treated with dignity and respect in their voices and perspectives heard and valued, and make sure that those perspectives are part of the discussion of what should be fair and what should be just.
Thank you, Ms. Green Hawkins. Appreciate it. Next up, Judge Dumas. Tell us about an obstacle you've overcome or a forming experience that you believe indicates your judicial philosophy or your view of the judge.
So although there were many things that I could probably cite, growing up, I will use my first 10 years on the bench. I came to the bench as a young jurist when, there were people who said that I wasn't ready, that it was, I was much too young. And so I really, my family was my village, was my core. And during the first 10 years, of me being on the bench, I got married, I got divorced, I had my last child, and I lost both my parents. And, for me to be a young judge and going through all of that drama, trauma, and dysfunction, I still had to come to work every day and be 110% for the people that I said that I would serve. And, I learned that, even though I was going through my own stuff and I had my own brokenness, and some mornings I didn't even want to get out of bed, but because I knew that there were people depending on me and depending on my work and depending on my decisions to help them to get through whatever it was they were dealing with and to help them resolve whatever they needed to resolve, that I had to do that. I had to show up. My full self had to show up. I had to sacrifice my stuff that I was going through in order to be there for others. And to me, that's what judges have to do. It is not about us. It is about the people that we serve. And yes, we are human. However, we do have to put our capes on for others often, because that is what we said we would do when we ran or we were appointed, whatever the situation was. It's people first. It's about them, and it's not about us.
Thank you, Judge Dumas. Judge Crompton, your forming experience that informs your role, your perspective on the role of the judge and your judicial philosophy.
Well, there's lots. I mean, I think you don't get to 52 years old without having a lot of life lessons, both at home and professionally. I saw a tweet from Denzel Washington today that said, "You're never too important to be nice to people." And I think that's really important. One quick story, I guess, is I was in New York 15 years ago and I dropped my scarf. A homeless gentleman reached for it. I picked it up. I took it on the train with me. I stewed for 4 hours on that train for not giving him my scarf. Silly, right? I've spent time in church now working on our homeless shelter over the last 15 years, just to make sure that we never lose that connection to those who are not as blessed as we are. And so I've gone out of my way to try to make sure, even recognizing that all of us on this screen have a lot of blessings, and a lot more blessings than most. We treat people with dignity, and we're never too important not to be nice to people. As a judge, I have spent every day trying to remind myself, not just of the scarf, but that we're all the same, and that the one thing I will never do, and I tried to never do it in my previous professional capacity and as a judge, is to think you're something just because you're a judge. We're all the same. We're serving the public in different capacities. And yes, being a judge at times is an important role, and we can't lose sight of that. But that doesn't make us important people. I go out of my way to tell people I'm a regular dad, because I try to instill and try to insist that just because I have some robes in my closet doesn't make me any different than people before me, be it judges be it lawyers or individuals.
Thank you, Judge. And then last, Judge Street, tell us about a forming experience or an obstacle you surmounted that you think helps explain your philosophy.
Well, of course, there are many. I'll start, with the first 10 years of my life, which I've started to share in this election cycle, that my mother was the victim of domestic violence when I was a child. So that meant that I was a victim, having had to observe that. So the reason why I bring that up is because I've learned how to, not allow my victimization to control me, to make sure that you respond to victimization in a way where you become empowered. And that's what I've done. That's what I watched my mother do. My mother raised me, but my father, was in my life, and I visited him in jail before. So my father's been to jail. I'm sure that informed my reason as to why I became a lawyer, why I became a public defender. Now, I also went through a divorce, which was another traumatic experience. And that was when I decided, it was shortly after that I decided to run for judge. I think I had the courage after that to do something for myself, to do something that I wanted to do. And I won. And it was I'm battle tested, because it was a tough election. I have a different take on being a judge. Now, yes, you go through trauma as a person, but when you're a judge, you're able to focus on other people's problems and not think about your own problems. And that much I appreciate about the job. Even as a public defender, I found myself immersed in other people's problems, and I didn't think about my own. And so I appreciate that side of the job. It actually allows you to focus on helping other people solve their problems. And that helps you. It's kind of like therapy for you and whatever you're experiencing. So I appreciate this job in this field, because you become so adept at problem solving, dealing with other people's problems, that you then become skilled at dealing with your own traumatic experiences. And that's hopefully what I've done.
Thank you, Judge Street. Appreciate it. So for the next one, we're going to start with Ms. Wallace. And I want to get back to the Commonwealth Court, because obviously we're here to talk about an election for the Commonwealth Court. And we've already talked a lot about the importance of this court and its unique focus and its unique nature. So I just wanted to give each of you an opportunity to spend 2 minutes telling the voters watching what qualifies you? What about your background uniquely qualifies you for this unique court? So Ms. Wallace, why don't you start us off?
So I have worked at an appellate court and a trial court where I've drafted decisions for judges to sign. I've also served as a special law master where I've sat and I've taken exhibits, I've ruled on objections, I've sworn witnesses in, and that experience is quasi-judicial, so similar to my colleagues that are judges. And I think what's really unique and fitting for me to run for this court is my broad background and how I can tie in both my experience that's either from behind the bench drafting decisions, sitting as a master, or litigating. So this court sits as a trial court and an appellate court, and it covers a lot of substantive areas that I cover. And for that reason, I'm well qualified for the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Ms. Green Hawkins, tell us about what in your background uniquely qualifies you to be a judge on the Commonwealth Court.
Well, my background shows that my career and experience are steeped in administrative law, which is a lot of the work of the Commonwealth Court. But I also passed the fit test. And I say, you want someone who, can be fair. And I certainly showed that fairness in my background when I worked as a mediator, helping parties resolve their disputes. And also when I worked with a Superior Court judge as well as a federal court judge, being in chambers with the judges, making the proper recommendations to the judges about the decisions that they should make. You want someone who can show integrity, the eye and fit, someone who's going to do the right thing regardless of all the noise going on around them. And I certainly had to show that integrity when I was an elected official on Allegheny County Council, when I served on the Port Authority Board of Allegheny County, and when I served on the Community Task Force for Police Reform here in the city of Pittsburgh. Anytime you're serving in a public manner, you have to have integrity and be able to make the right decisions regardless of the outside pressures. And I've done that. And the T and fit, you want someone who can show the right temperament, someone who's going to treat people with dignity and respect and let them know that their voices are valued and that they have been fully heard. And treating people with dignity and respect is something I learned a long, long time ago, and it's in me to do. It's what's in me to do, not just because I am a lawyer for a union where we talk about dignity and respect all the time, but because it's the right thing to do. With my experience, plus passing the fit test, I am certainly uniquely qualified for the bench on Commonwealth Court.
Terrific. I'm going to say, between the fit test and the crushing grapes to make wine thing, I'm picking up a lot of really good, useful things I'm going to start deploying. I'm going to shamelessly steal from the six of you. Mm-hmm. So next up for this question is Judge Dumas. Judge Dumas, what uniquely qualifies you to sit on the Commonwealth Court?
So I believe that, there is definitely value. There is value in the institutional knowledge of a trial court judge who has been sitting for, almost 20 years on the bench, listening to cases, formulating decisions. I know what the record is supposed to look like when it goes, goes up for appeal on any level, because I'm creating the record consistently day in and day out. I have, authored hundreds of opinions, over the years, because, of course, decisions, from the trial court, appeals do go up. And so I've had to author the opinions that go up. I think in particular, though, too, for me, dealing with, and I said this before, having the opportunity to work with, entities like the school districts, like the DHS, we deal, even in criminal court, we deal with, probation and parole, issues. And so as a trial court judge and having sat in so many different areas of the court, there's not really an area of the court that I haven't touched that does not, end up in some way, shape, or form in the Commonwealth Court. And so it is really just taking the years of experience, the maturity of not just a trial lawyer, which I was at first, I had to be a trial lawyer. Well, I didn't have to be, but I was a trial lawyer first. I sat, as a leader of a nonprofit, general counsel of a corporation, so I brought a wealth of experience with me to the bench, and then honing that experience and really developing, and maturing, as a jurist that, serves with distinction, understands the law, and understands the value of relationships and collaboration, with my peers, my colleagues, as well as community organizations, because I truly believe that, we've got to understand the issues in the community in order to really make the decisions that make sense. I can see the whole picture because I've been here for so long, and just taking all of that to the next level to be able to impact even more so people, not just 1, 2, or 3, but all Pennsylvanians at one time.
Thank you, Judge Dumas. So next up, Judge Crompton, what in your background uniquely qualifies you to be elected to the Commonwealth Court?
Well, I think I've tried to outline some of my skill set as on the statutory and regulatory, so I won't spend much more time on that. I think in government, I have served as staff with the General Assembly. I have worked in the governor's office and the lieutenant governor's office, and now I am a judge. So as luck would have it, I've had the honor of working at all 3 branches of government. And all 3 branches of government sometimes have dust-ups that often come before the Commonwealth Court. And so I think I have a deep appreciation of the powers and the roles of each branch. I think some frustration that we have heard from voters over the last year or so is that there's a belief that each branch is not staying in his or her lane. And I think one of the jobs of a judge on the Commonwealth Court is to referee, if you will, of the powers of the Constitution, and to make sure, including the judicial branch, that each stay in their lane. And I've had a lot of experience in litigating issues between the branches of government. I've also developed a skill set that is wide on the branches, on the agencies, on revenue and health, insurance, and a variety of other, including labor and industry, where a lot of cases that we get are workers' comp and unemployment comp cases. We talked about each case relatable to one person. Often those cases, workers' comp and unemployment comp, that don't come from the trial level, they just come from agency. I've probably written at least 20 or 25 workers' comp cases so far. So I think I have a broad experience that serves the court well.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. Next up, Judge Street. Tell us about your background, or what in your background uniquely qualifies you for election to the Commonwealth Court.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. And let me congratulate you on the symmetry of these questions, because this makes so much sense after talking about our personal experiences. Now we talk about our professional experiences. And so you bring all of that to the bench with you. And that is part of what makes you qualified. And so, I after graduating from law school, I had 2 small children, got married. That's part of who I am. But I was a trial attorney for a lot of years, and I practiced in all areas of the law. I as a public defender, you did family law, you went to juvenile court, I did criminal court. I stood on my feet before judges and represented thousands of clients every day, all day, and helped them the best that I could. And I think that experience is unique. It really speaks to how you might conduct yourself on the bench, because you know what the litigants or what the attorneys are going through that is standing before you, because you used to be in that position. I also did work as a trial attorney on the civil side. When I took the job at the nonprofit and affordable housing, I was able to get some experience in zoning. I would supervise the sale and development of commercial and residential properties. So I dealt with tax assessments, government compliance, rules and regulations that are, involved with affordable housing, which is funded by the federal government. Now, as a trial judge, I was assigned to the criminal division, and now I'm assigned to the civil division, where I handle statutory appeals involving government entities. And that is the work of the Commonwealth Court. That's part of that small sliver of cases that go to the Commonwealth Court if there's an appeal. And so my experience as a trial attorney and now as a trial judge make me uniquely qualified for the Commonwealth Court. Even some of my volunteer efforts are connected to what the Commonwealth Court does. Before becoming a public defender, I used to go into the jails and register people to vote who didn't know that they had the right to vote while they were waiting for trial. And, it was a year 2000 landmark decision by the Commonwealth Court that restored convicted felons' right to vote. So a lot of my work sort of lines up with what the Commonwealth Court does, and here we are. So thank you for that question.
Sure. And last but not least, Judge Spurgeon, tell us about what in your professional background or your skills uniquely qualifies you for the Commonwealth Court.
Sure. So I think, one of the most fascinating things and the most attractive aspect of the Commonwealth Court to me as a trial judge is it does still have juridical jurisdiction. So sitting as a trial judge in some cases. And that's something I love my job as a trial judge, and I loved being a trial lawyer as well. So I think that's a perfect blend. I was an accomplished trial lawyer in Allegheny County. And because of that, that's how I rose through the ranks in the district attorney's office so quickly, based on my ability to assess evidence and determine whether or not cases had merit, didn't have merit, and made decisions as a result of that, which then moved me up through the chain of management to then where I was helping other people make those decisions as well. So in Allegheny County, there's almost 20,000 criminal cases filed a year. And that was part of my job, is to determine what cases had merit, what cases should be charged, those type of things. Following along those lines, I think that was very beneficial for me as a trial judge. As a trial judge, as I said, I am in family division. I had no experience in that area. And a lot of it is very administrative in terms of orphans court and family division, two of the biggest parts of my work as a judge. No experience, but I've never been overruled for a decision that I've made. And I think that's based on my ability to look at facts and make decisions as a result of what's presented in front of me. In Allegheny County, we have a huge number of hearing officers because it's such a large jurisdiction with so many cases. And that's part of my job as well, is to look at the cases that went before hearing officers and sign off on them and adopt those as my rulings, or overrule them and make new decisions. And that's a large portion of what Commonwealth Court does, is it deals with appeals from government agencies, other people that have looked and made a decision on the case. And then now it's your turn to make that decision. I was so proud when I got the top rating for Commonwealth Court by the Pennsylvania Bar Association, but I think that's in part of recognizing the ability to make those decisions, and the life experience that we've all had is going to help you address those issues to the point where you're going to make the best decision on the cases presented in front of you. And you don't have to worry whether or not someone is good at that or not good at that based on their record. So thank you.
Thank you, Judge. All right, so for our next question, and for this question, we'll start with Ms. Green Hawkins. My question is, tell us about what you've done in your job history or in your personal life to support diversity, inclusion, and equity, and to combat various forms of pernicious violence. And then what would your plans be if you were elected to the Commonwealth Court to enhance diversity, inclusion, and equity, and to fight bias in our judicial system? So Ms. Green Hawkins, why don't you start us off?
In my background, I have worked with organizations that advocate for justice and equality for poor and marginalized members of our society, particularly here throughout Pennsylvania. And this includes things like a living wage. This includes things like clean air, clean water, affordable housing, and helping victims of domestic violence with job resources, with housing and other resources. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question.
I remember something about bias.
Yeah, I have this habit of asking multi-part questions. You judges get to do this, so now this is my chance to ask multi-part questions. And the question is about fighting bias and enhancing diversity, inclusion, and equity in the system. What would your plans be if you were elected to the Commonwealth Court to enhance diversity and inclusion and fight bias?
Thank you for reminding me of that. I think it's important to make sure that where we can participate in hiring people, that we can look for people with diverse backgrounds and diverse experiences, and look at different schools, for example, look at people already who work within the system for elevation, if we can. I know that when I was coming through law school, and even after law school, I worked with two judges who were African-American judges, and they were committed to diversity within their chambers. And the experience was very valuable and helped enrich the discussion that we would have about what justice and fairness should look like. So from firsthand experience, I'm certainly committed to making sure where I'm able to make sure that we have diversity and inclusion of different voices within our system. And I also think it's important to address bias, either through training, either through pointing out disparities within our system, and also doing something about them where we are able to, because I think bias is certainly something that blocks people's access to justice. And if we're a system about justice and fairness for all, then bias simply cannot be a part of it. And we have to take measures where we can, everywhere we can, to make sure that we're getting rid of it in our system.
Thank you, Ms. Green Hawkins. Judge Dumas, your your answer on what you've done to enhance diversity and inclusion efforts and to fight bias, and what would your plans be if elected to the Commonwealth Court in that regard?
So I think that, the end justice for all is really, something that not just as judges that we ensure occurs in our courtrooms, but it's, it is who we should be at our core. And so, for me, I have, I've just been who I am. And I make sure that in my courtroom, the access to justice is priority, that everyone's voices are heard. If there is, a time when I have to, be the one to make the bold decision to call out inequity and injustice and, and bias, I do that because I think that that's a responsibility that we have, not just in our professions, but as people, because wrong is wrong. And I also, I take my private time as well as my professional time to make sure that I am playing my part in helping to educate communities that want to be educated about, the ills of implicit bias and what that does to us as a society, just person to person, let alone what happens in our judicial system when implicit bias exists. So professionally, I have participated in several, initiatives, within our court system, as well as outside. I am a board member of organizations where I am the chair or co-chair of the diversity and inclusiveness initiatives. I talk to young people about, why it is that it is important for them to use their voices against bias and against discrimination and injustice. I have, daughters that I, consistently, make sure that they are participating as well on their level and with their peers. My staff is consistently diverse. It has been from day one. I think that is also an obligation that we have. And for me, going to the Commonwealth Court, I would like to begin to create a pipeline for students of color, law students of color. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Judge Dumas. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Next up is Judge Crompton. Tell us about what you have done to foster diversity and inclusion and to fight bias, and what are your plans if you are elected to a full term on the Commonwealth Court in that regard?
Well, first, I thought I would start a little bit about my old life when I worked in the Senate. We looked at these issues over and over, and one of the most important parts of racial diversity is to ensure that all people have access to legal services. And so time and time again in the budget in Pennsylvania, we increased, often by double digits, the funding for legal services so people in all parts of the Commonwealth could have access to the courts and lawyers that are skilled for cases that they bring. Also, one of the new programs right before I left the Senate we set up was a special fund to ensure that individuals who have been charged with capital murder had access to representation paid for by the state if there wasn't a local lawyer willing to pro bono those cases if those people were in need, especially on those high profile cases that good representation is so important. I served on the diversity committee for the Pennsylvania Convention Center when I served there, and it was one of those life lessons on making sure that the contracts at the convention center went to people of color and other organizations that were disadvantaged, and that they also had work in the convention center appropriately. In the Senate, we also hired women for positions that have never been held by women prior. We were proud of the chief clerk and the parliamentarian and other positions that were now, and still are now, held by women. As a judge, I've told my staff and my clerks time and time again that pro se litigants deserve every bit of review that those that can afford high-priced lawyers. We look at those filings very carefully because sometimes they come from inmates, sometimes they're probation and parole, but we scour those pro se to ensure that they have access to justice.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. Judge Street, can you tell us about the efforts you have undertaken to encourage and foster diversity and inclusion and fight bias, and what would you do if elected to the Commonwealth Court in that regard?
Thank you. Well, I'll start with my staff. The staff is very diverse. It's diverse with race and ethnicity. Certainly, I've had a multiple. I don't want to name them; it can sound kind of corny. But my staff is also diverse by age. So my secretary is over 70 years of age. Currently, my first secretary was a millennial. So you know, I don't discriminate by age as well. I've had openly gay law clerks. So my staff has been diverse from day one. I also was always the one getting elected to be chair of affinity groups. So when I was in law school, I was elected to be chair or president of the Black Law Students Association, which I'm very proud of. And we know affinity groups usually promote diversity and inclusion and make sure that minority groups are being represented in, you know, whatever institution they are established in. Even as a judge, I was elected as my peers to be the chair of Judicial Council, which is a group of judges of color across the state from Philadelphia all the way to Allegheny County. And that group's goal was to make sure that we stay connected to the community, which I'm very community service based, so that was right up my alley. But we also addressed racial issues that occurred in our court system. We know racism does even occur in the halls of justice. And so most recently, you saw some of the, maybe you have seen some of the newspaper coverage of the Cure report, which is, you know, sort of a story that came out of Philadelphia, where they were trying to address racial issues or issues of race in the court system. And as the chair of Judicial Council, I had to make statements and address the administrative governing board for the first judicial districts in my capacity as the chair of Judicial Council. So I have a rich history in addressing these issues. It's not always easy, but I will take that experience and expertise with me wherever I go.
Thank you, Judge Street. Judge Spurgeon, your experiences and your plans with diversity and inclusion efforts.
So I think we first of all have to accept that equal protection in the law isn't a guideline. It is the law. It's not a suggestion. It is the framework for us. And by doing that, we have to figure out how we can do that as jurists or how we've done that. So I've been proud to serve on the diversity committee of the Allegheny County Bar Association, which is a collection of all the affinity groups trying to promote that make sure we have diversity in various aspects of the legal field, which then sometimes cross over to other sectors besides just the legal field, but it's a collective group trying to deal with those issues. And we know diversity and issues and bias comes in many, many forms. You know, it's not just sometimes superficial, sometimes it's not something you can see. There's a lot of other aspects of that. So it's been very proactive within the court system. You know, I was the lead prosecutor for domestic violence cases in Allegheny County. And as part of that, I was constantly advocating on behalf of battered women and children and trying to make systems changes to benefit people that were in that situation. But we also have to do that with people of a variety of backgrounds. I told you that I grew up in an area, and I still live in the same school district that I grew up in. And that group and that school district is 56% of kids of color. And it also is a school district that every student qualifies for a free lunch. And because of that, I've stayed in that community because I think we need to make sure that we are serving as representatives, as to let people and kids know that they could become a judge, that they could do something other than maybe that they believe that they could do or they were told that they could do. In terms of those types of things, I think we have to constantly be striving for that. I thought growing up with my background, I understood everything about poverty, but we constantly have to be educating people. I went to the best training on a poverty summit that I had ever been to in my life and realized that I really did not know as much as I thought that I did. And I think as judges, we have to continue to do that, not just for us, but our employees and everyone that touches the court system, all the employees and all the interactions that we have, because we have to make sure that we are not having a bias that sometimes, you know, is implicit, that you don't even realize. And I think education is key as to that, is making sure that we're constantly learning. And as judges, we also have a responsibility to hold our colleagues accountable when we see something that's wrong. And that's something that we should stand up and do, and I will continue to do.
Thank you, Judge Spurgeon. And lastly, Ms. Wallace, your efforts on diversity and inclusion efforts, and what would you do in that regard if you were elected to Commonwealth Court?
The very reason that I went to law school was my goal to work at Northwestern Legal Services, which provides free legal aid to low-income individuals. I was actually a broadcast communications major, and I was filming a commercial for the YWCA, and I was in the basement and I saw a pamphlet for Northwestern Legal Services. And when I read about how it protected women and also it can be men in domestic violence situations and provides free legal aid to level the playing field in certain situations, that's what catapulted me into going to law school. From my first year in law school, I hung in my locker the phrase "seek justice, love kindness, and walk humbly." That's been my life motto. That's my campaign motto, and that will be my motto on the bench. My husband and I own our own businesses, and we have had the opportunity to employ and exercise fairness among different races, sexual orientation, and different ages. And I don't like saying that in a way like we should get credit. Nobody should just get credit for doing the right thing. It's the right thing to do. I will point out to you that our staff ranges from 1 to 5 people, and our minority race in our county is less than 3%. So the fact that we were able to employ a minority race, we've also employed a millennial and somebody that we knew when she was about to retire. She's 2 years away from retiring, and we offered her a position. I can't believe I only have 30 seconds left. This is my favorite topic. I will end by saying that I recognize that implicit bias is real, and that I will have training for my staff members, most likely biannually. And I want to wrap up by saying that my mom and I had a conversation about implicit bias, and she said to me, well, at least it's not as blatant and awful as racism. And I said, Mom, in a lot of ways, it's more dangerous because people don't realizing that it's impacting their decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Appreciate it. So I think I have time for one more question. Debbie, is that right? You want to give me a thumbs up on that? Okay. All right. I have time for one more. We're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to ask you all to, I know you've already been pressed for time as it is, but I'm putting you on the Mark Cuban 24-second shot clock on Shark Tank. And it's for the fun question. This is my favorite question. I ask it at every forum, but I'm going to put a big caveat in it because I seem to always get the same answer, and I'm going to prohibit the 6 of you from giving this answer. The question is, it's the hero question. Who is your hero? And it doesn't need to be a judicial hero, but it can be. And it doesn't need to be a person who's alive. It can be somebody who's no longer with us. But who is your hero and why? And here's the caveat. The answer cannot be either Scalia or Ginsburg. So you can't. So outside of Scalia and Ginsburg, tell me your hero, your judicial or non-judicial hero, and why. So we'll start with Judge Dumas. Go ahead. Who's your hero?
I finally got to go first. Yay. So my hero is a woman by the name of Constance Dumas. Who is she? She was my mom. She's not with me anymore, but my mom was tough as nails. She was the one that made sure that I am the woman that I am today. She didn't have an education, but she was a strong advocate that her children were going to have the education that she didn't have. She went back to school. She was a single parent. She worked in a factory her entire adult life until she decided in her 50s, when all of us were grown, she went back to school, got her GED, then her college degree, and became a teacher. So that is the woman that I strive to be every single day.
Thank you, Judge Dumas. Appreciate it. Judge Crompton, who's your hero?
Well, that's a tough question and one I had not prepped for. I will say 2 people very quickly. If it's cheating, I'm sorry. First, I also want to say my mom, because of the humility and other things that she instilled in all of us, whether we liked it or not. She's taught me so many things about life, and she still lives not too far from me and takes care of our children and is very important even at age 84. My professional hero, I guess if I had to pick one, was a guy that some people will never have heard of. His name was Steve McNett. I worked under his tutelage for years and years in the Senate. He was one of the simplest but also smartest men I've ever met and taught me so much about government, the law, and quite frankly, people.
Thank you, Judge Crompton. I actually had a moment where I thought to myself, should I also add the mothers to the prohibition list? But I feel like if I did that, then I'd have to answer to my own mother. So we're not going to go there. So mothers are valid answers. So Judge Street, you're up next. Tell us who your hero is.
Well, I have to say my mother first, but that's not my real answer, but I have to say
that's implicit. We'll just make that implicit for everybody. Yeah.
I told you about my mother already and why she's my hero, but I'm going to go with a fun one, a fun choice. And I'm going to say Tina Turner, because I don't know if you saw the Tina documentary that was recently released, and you know what that woman went through and how long of a life she's lived and how she started her life over in her 40s, close to 50, And I think she's an example to all women that you can start over, or to all people that it's never too late to start over and come on, do better in your second time around. And I think that she's amazing. So I'm going to go with Tina Turner.
That's a great pick. And I'm sorry, it's hard to do better than Simply the Best. That is maybe one of the best songs ever done by anybody. Great pick. Judge Spurgeon, your hero.
So I'm going to go to the next level. I'm going to say my grandmother. And my grandmother, if you follow me on social media, you'll see pictures of she and I together all the time. She's going to be 101 years old in June. And she was born right before women got the right to vote. And she is somebody that has shaped my life. And she's outlived all of her children. She's buried all of her own children. And she still is every day uplifting and thoughtful and full of love. And she has shaped me. She taught me the adage, that which much is expected, that which much is given, much is expected. And that's the way I've shaped not only my personal life, but my professional life as well. And I have the privilege to have moved her into the house next door to me a couple of years ago. So we take care of each other. We watch each other. But I think that's what shaped me. I think she's the person that signed me up to vote. She's the person that shaped my spiritual journey. And, she's a reminder of my mom who's passed every single day. And so I can't thank her enough for that. But she's just a wonderful human being. And I like to think a little bit of her rubbed off on me, and I'm a better person for having been related to her.
Fantastic. Thank you, Judge Spurgeon. Appreciate it. Miss Wallace, who's your hero?
I will start by saying that I love my mom, who's still alive and is going to eventually watch this. So Mom, I do love your selflessness and your constant support, but I'm going to use this time to talk about my late father. He passed away 12 years ago this month. He passed away when I was pregnant with his first grandchild. But when I was growing up, he taught me so many valuable lessons. It started with things that were simple, like always leave a place better than you found it. He's the one that taught me as a teenager that the primary purpose in life is to better the lives of others. And he had this wild analytical brain that always forced me to think of every aspect. And he also, even though he didn't play chess with me regularly, he fostered that and that, thinking 5 moves ahead in all the different scenarios. So I really credit him for where I am today, both with my analytical thinking, but also with my heart for other people. And I will say that regardless of how this advances moving forward, I wish so much he could see that I'm even a part of this conversation. When I was a little girl, he used to lift my wrist up over my head and proclaim, Judge Stacy.
Fantastic. Thank you, Miss Wallace. And finally, Miss Green Hawkins, tell us about your hero.
Thank you. Mom notwithstanding, I'd say my dad. I refer to my dad as my first real hero. I always just remember as a young child thinking that my dad knew everything. My dad could do anything. My dad would, turn over the whole earth to rectify something for me. And my dad always encouraged me to do anything I wanted to do, to be whatever I wanted to be. And this coming from a man who was born the month of the Great Depression. The month the Great Depression started in 1929 with the crash of the stock market. Attended segregated schools in Jim Crow's South and everything that Jim Crow wrought in his life. And my dad only had an 8th grade education, but he believed that I could do and be anything I wanted to be and do, and go to college and become a Supreme Court justice. I remember telling him when I was 7 years old, and he said, you sure can. You just have to go to law school. And so here I am all these years later, but it's certainly because of those seeds that my dad, my first real hero who would come to my rescue, planted in me all those years ago.
Thank you, Ms. Green Hawkins, and thank you all very much for those outstanding answers. Before I turn it over to Debbie, my last observation is, I'm sure everybody watching will agree with this, that we have an embarrassment of riches here, 6 outstanding candidates. So it's a very difficult choice for our voters, but I commend it to our voters to make their choice and to choose wisely. Thank you, all 6 of you, for participating tonight, and I will turn it back over to Debbie to wrap us up.
Thank
Thank you very much, Karl. Thank you all for participating, and thank you for attending. Thank you for voters for listening, taking the time to educate yourself. Please spread the word because we want people to get out and vote. Voting for judges is important. This is what we have, and we need to have educated voters. So thank you, everybody. Go to pmconline.org. Pennsylvania Bar Association has information. Philadelphia Bar Association does, as well as the Allegheny County Bar Association. Thank you to the Dauphin County Library for organizing this and helping us get it together. And everybody have a great night.